Hello, good afternoon, evening, morning, depending on when you're watching this video. My name is Jude Idada. I'm speaking to you from Lagos, Nigeria. I'm a theater artist, a dramatist in terms of being a playwright. I'm also a filmmaker, I'm a novelist, I'm a poet, and I'm a lover of the arts. That being said, I live in Toronto, Canada, but right now I'm in Nigeria. I'm working on several projects. And it is my pleasure having this opportunity to speak to you about such a stimulating topic, which is West African performing arts. So I presume this is for Sheridan College, and it's for a theater class, and I hope it will be an enriching experience. I'll just do some little house business. First off, I'm speaking to a camera, so my eyes are going to be roving all over the place, so please don't get distracted. I have my laptop by my side where I have further information, which I'll refer to from time to time. And I'll try to speak as clear as I can so that, this is an engaging reaction between yourself and myself. Once again, I'm Jude Idada, and this is a tutorial. Should I call it a tutorial or a lecture on West African performing arts? First off, where is West Africa? I'm from Nigeria myself. That's my heritage. Although I reside in Toronto, Canada, I've been there for 20 years, 20 odd years, thereabouts. I'm a naturalized Canadian, but my heritage is Nigerian. Nigeria is a country on the West African coast line of Africa. It's a country of about 205 to 220 million people. It has around an average of 400 tribes, and out of these 400 tribes, you have them speaking around 365 different languages and dialects. So it's a very rich country in terms of natural resources and also human capital, which is people, populace. That being said, it had its independence, or gained its independence from Britain, the United Kingdom, in 1960. It became a republic in 1963. Canada is not yet a republic, and that's why you still have a governor general. We had a governor general between 1960 and 1963. When we became a republic, we adopted the American system of governance, which is, you have the president, and then you have the House of Rep, the Senate, and all of that, instead of the parliamentary system, which is what runs in Canada as it is presently. And that being said, this is just giving a context of where I'm speaking about. But I'm not only focusing on Nigeria, I'm also focusing on other West African countries where to the west of Nigeria you have Benin Republic, Benin, depending on how you want to pronounce it. After that you have Togo, you have Ghana, it keeps on going like that, Cote d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone, Gambia. You go further north, you have Senegal, you have Mali, Burkina Faso. You come further, you have Niger. So these are some of the countries in the West African region of Africa. And these countries are somehow related to each other. You have the Fulani tribe, which, when I say tribe, obviously, which is a group of people that have a common language, common heritage, common culture, and all of that. It spans several of the West African countries. I think it's the most widely spread tribe. It comes from the Futa Jalon, which is where they originally come from, and it stretches all the way even through into Central Africa, even into Eastern Africa. You have the Yorubas, which is one of the major tribes also, which bestrides both Nigeria and Benin onto the west. You have the Igbos, which is a major tribe in Nigeria. You have the Hausas, which is further up north. And you have the Madinka, you have, you go to Ghana, you have people from Kumasi, people from Sekondi, people from Accra itself. You even go to Cote d'Ivoire, you have people from Abidjan, people from Yamoussoukro. In Benin itself, you have people from Dahomey, you have people from Ouidah. So it's a very rich region of all these people speaking different languages, having different histories, but all of them unified by a common shared heritage, which is the close neighborliness and the interchanging of these cultural, facets of their personality. But now putting it into the concept of West African performing arts. We say first and foremost, it finds its root in antiquity, antiquity being the past. Unlike the Western world, which you're talking about Europe or North America, where you have theater being structured contemporarily, there is still a correlation where when you go into the past, even of the antiquity, you might have theater being as unstructured as we still have it in West Africa. So right now in West Africa, we have two kinds of theater. You have the traditional theater, which is the one that comes from our heritage, which is the one that is performed in informal settings, which is the one that goes readily into our culture. It speaks our language, has the same idioms, the same symbols, spreads the same message, both thematically, didactic, and all of that, and has a semblance, or will I say, has a thread of interconnectivity that runs between each one of them, which exposes or posits that there's a relationship between the physical and the spiritual. So it's a very spiritual experience, which is the traditional African, West African performing arts. And then you have the structured performing arts, which is more contemporary, which is more recent, where you have, you have a proscenium stage, a truss stage, you have a theater house, you have the audience separated from the performers, you have, written text, you have music that is scored, composed, and captured in formal forms, and all. So it borrows a lot from the colonial masters that came, where you have the two colonial masters being England and UK and France, which are the predominant colonial masters in West Africa. So we have the Francophone West Africa, which are the African countries that were colonized by the French, and then you have the Anglophone West Africa, which is the West African countries that were colonized by the British. So you have them pushing the same kinds of theater that is prevalent in these colonial countries. So you have for the Anglophone countries, which is like Nigeria, which is like Ghana, you have, or Gambia, Sierra Leone, you have that, you're very Shakespearean, very Victorian, Charles Malo, and all of that kind of stuff. But in the Francophone countries, you have their own kind of theater that, borrows a lot from, Commedia dell'arte and all of that, which is in the French structured theater forms. But now we'll be talking more, we'll start from the antiquity, which is the traditional, ancient, historic kind of theater forms. First off, let us see, what is it? Where is it happening? Who are the performers? Who are the audience? And all of that. It is very much a picture or an image of life. An image of life as in the West African sees himself in the cosmos of the African pantheon, where you have various gods, and these gods are constantly interrelating with the living man through their ancestors, through animals, through nature itself, the trees, the rivers, the seas, and everything. There's a constant, dialogue that is happening between all these people, and this thing is captured in West African performing arts. So West African performing arts is principally enshrined in more than 30 different things. So you have it in song, you have it in dance, you have it in mask, which is synonymous with the costuming, you have it in the ritual space, which is very informal. And then you have it in dialogue. You have it in dialogue as captured in incantations, both call and response and all of that. But this being said is, as I said, it's a spiritual exercise. It's the essence of the West African connecting with the primordial as what he sees in terms of his ancestry, both his ancestors themselves and the gods that be. So we see a situation where they are adherents, and obviously then they are the performers. The performers themselves are people who are either dedicated to the spiritual practice, either it being the gods as it exists, or being the ancestors as it exists, or being the totems or symbols that represent the gods or the ancestors. So you can see people in Ibibio, the riverine areas of Nigeria, you see them, they use things that are very aquatic in nature. So their ideas of gods, or the symbols they used to represent gods, are fishes and crocodiles and all of that stuff. And you see those things captured in the mask and the costume in the wear. So you have the masquerade being stock characters. So I'll be comparing it with Western theater. So you have stock characters that are ancient in nature. They keep on replicating themselves from generation to generation. They do not change. They are stock characters. They represent gods, or they represent ancestors, or they represent symbols of reference, or beings of reference. It might be like the crocodile, as I said, with the Ibibios, and several tribes that are that live around the river Rhine area. So they use all these aquatic animals as a symbol or representation of the gods as they see them, or their spiritual cosmos. So you see in their performing arts that all these are represented in itself. I'll go back again to explain what I had said earlier. So you have West African performing arts captured in terms of, the ritual space. The ritual space can be a revered space, maybe a shrine or a grove where the people gather at a certain time of the year to dialogue or engage with the spiritual. Or it could be somewhere that moves. It could be a town square, a village square. It could even be, a riverine area where they are coming to worship the gods. But so that means the ritual space itself is mobile. Excuse me. It's mobile in itself. But that being mobile, it could also be fixed, as I said, when it comes to a shrine or a grove. So we have the ritual space. Then we have the performers. The performers themselves are either people who have been separated or chosen by the gods or chosen by the spirits to represent them, because it's a very it's a transference experience in terms of you being the adherent. You are not only performing based on rehearsals or practice and all of that, you are also submitting yourself to being a vessel in communication with the gods. So there is that place of improvisation, there is the structured place of rehearsal, and then there is the instant, spontaneous place of engagement with the spiritual. So these people are either, adherents of a certain religious practice, or people that are respected in society, or a member of a certain class or group of people, like initiates into a cult, who represent certain things that has to do with the spiritual being that is being worshipped, or the spiritual practice that is being enacted. So those are the performers in themselves. But also the audience themselves are also performers, because they are also it's a lot of interactivity. They are also believers in whatever the principle or primary belief system is of that place. So they know their place in this performance, and they know when to engage. So you have, those are the adherents being the performers. Then you have the mask or the costuming. It could be a masquerade who you don't even see. Sometimes you see a situation where the mask and the costuming, there's no one inside, but it's moving like a human being. So I know it's pretty far-fetched, and people might not understand or believe in things like that, but they are real. I have seen them. I shared some materials, which I guess you have seen by now, where you see it in Benin Republic, which is Cotonou. You can see the masquerade that, with the leaf fronds the palm leaf fronds that are being loaded on it. And you can see that it starts moving by itself. And even when they stop it, they calm it down and they remove the palm fronds. You see something appears. That means the gods have brought the gift to the living, or to the people in the earthly plane. But it's all performing arts. It is all a ritual. It has music, it has dance, it has movement, it has incantations, which is dialogue. It has a call and response, which is engagement between the performers and the audience in themselves. Yeah, so that being said, I'll go back again. We have talked about the ritual spaces, which are fixed or mobile. Fixed in terms of it being in a groove, it being, or a grove, it being in a temple, it being in a cleared out space that it has been reserved for performances like that, like a sacred space, or it being, to a large extent, moving into a place of worship where they go to engage the spiritual being, which is like a riverfront, a seafront, a sacred forest and all of that. So the people move there at a certain time of the year to perform. So something like Stonehenge that you have in the United Kingdom, something like that, So you have the Oshun Grove in Oshogbo here in Nigeria and West Africa, where people go at a certain time of the year from all around the world to worship Yemoja and Oshun, the river goddess. And there is a performance that goes with it. The dances are choreographed. They are ancient in nature. There's the incantations that are said. There are the adherents who perform all the ritual parts of the worship session. And then obviously there's the audience who know when to engage, because as I said, it's interactive. And then there's the costuming. They all wear white, with chalk over their bodies, which is a costuming itself. And then there are certain people who wear the mask. And the mask itself creates stock characters, as I said. So you can see how it fits into a performing culture, as it were. So that's just setting that up. I've talked about the adherents, I've talked about the audience, I've talked about the costuming, and sometimes it's body art where, the bodies are painted and with chalk or different kinds of ochre. To create a certain personage, a certain character that is recognizable by the living and the transisted, and also the gods. So the person or the performer themselves, they come as a person, as a canvas, and they are transformed by this painting, this body art that's put on them to become a character that is uniquely different in the way it moves, in the way it talks, in the dialogue and incantations, in the dance. It's a very rhythmical kind of performance, that is recognizable by both the performer and then the audience. They know when the character has come into being. They know what the character is trying to say. They understand the mime, the pantomime, the unspoken words. They understand the songs. They understand the dialogue. They know when the performance is changing. They know when there are acts in the performance itself. Of course, we know the 3-act structure, the beginning, the middle, and the end, and all of that. So it's also entrenched in this, but in a very informal kind of way, where everybody are born into the culture and they instinctively know what that is and where that is coming. So that is for the traditional West African art. But as I said, it's very spiritual in nature, because for the African looks at his life as a constant communion between the unseen and the seen. There's a constant dialogue that's happening between both of them. And this dialogue is captured in performance. It's captured in performance to tell a story, to teach a lesson, a moral, to initiate a certain season. Because, you have in Canada, we have summer, we have autumn, we have winter, we have spring and all of that. In West Africa, we don't have those kind of weathers. We just have the rainy season, we have the dry season, and then we have the Harmattan season. The Harmattan season and the dry season are, they interchange. But each season is actually captured with the kind of crops that are grown. So we have our culture really, centered around farming, around planting, around sustenance, So it's a lot about the gods and giving us, providing for us. So our performances are either thanking the gods for what they have given us or beseeching the gods to give us something. And in so doing, we're always offering or we're receiving. And in the offer and the receiving, we have created performances that are replicable, ancient in nature, and they go into the future. So we know that there's something called like the New Yam Festival. The New Yam Festival says when the farmers have planted their yams and they've had a bountiful harvest, they bring those yams out. And before they can eat the yam, they have to celebrate and thank the gods. And there are performances that go with it. Performances of stock characters who do what, when, and where. They say what, when, and where. To who, when, and where. It happened in the past, it is happening right now in the future, and it goes happening right now in the present, and it goes into the future. This is performance. This is performance because, as I said, it has dance, it has movement, it has dialogue, it has character, it has a ritual space, it has communion, which is communication between the performer and the viewer being other adherents who are the audience. And there is an interconnectivity and interactivity that happens between them, where even the audience, they have their time where they engage the performer. And it becomes a symbolic whole. It's a holistic whole that everybody is performing in this spiritual space. And then there is the part of the spiritual, where the spiritual itself is a character that engages in the performance. And he comes in his own time. So, in Western theater, you have, the beginning, three acts, you have the conception where you introduce the characters, you introduce the conflict and all of that. You have where you complicate it, the introduction, the complication, and then the resolution. It's the same thing. So there's a time when the spiritual engages to create the resolution. So the way the performances are, it is either telling a historical tale, retelling it to encourage, to remind, and all of that kind of stuff, or to celebrate. But then it also needs the spiritual to bring its rubber stamp. So there's a time in that performance that the spiritual joins the performer. And that is how you know it was a successful performance, because the adherents or the performers themselves, they have to perform to such an extent and in such truth of purpose and of belief that the spiritual is now encouraged to engage them in that performance. So that is what you see in most of the West African performing arts. That is when you see it in the historical context, which stretches, from antiquity. But there have been places where these things have been borrowed and brought into secular life, where it is replicated, it is repackaged, and it is given on stage for entertainment purposes, which has to do a lot with comedy, as you see them in Cameroon, you see them in Mali, you see them in Cote d'Ivoire, even in Nigeria, where stock characters are created, where they come into the normal consciousness of man in contemporary situations, and they do the same, they play the same moral parts, the same moral characterization that they had in the antiquity. They bring it into these secular kind of performances, and they play it out to engage the audience, with the goal being to share or to pass a message, as it were. I'll just consult more. Okay, so when you say the West African performing arts, as it were, there's a part of it that I haven't spoken about, which I did speak about it, but in a different context, which is the engagement of the spiritual and the performance. So let's call it magic, in Benin Republic, you call it voodoo, where a certain semblance or a certain, sequence of rituals that have to follow themselves in a particular way, have to be performed in a particular way by a particular people, creates a set response from the spiritual. So it's magical. And it's part of the West African performing arts, the magical part of it. So when you bring it into the contemporary, where you see playwrights who are taking the West African performing arts and they are entrapping it in the Western culture of theater, you always see that they bring the magical into it. They bring the magical into it on the vehicle of dance, and the vehicle of music, and the vehicle of incantation. You see, let me give you an example of one of the first Nobel Prize winner of literature, Professor Wole Soyinka. You see his plays like Death and the King's Horseman. You see a lot of dialogue happening between the physical plane and the spiritual plane, and it's captured by the dance and the marketplace, the movement and the incantations, of even Olunyolo or Olunde, where he's going. So these are characters in the play where he's going to the spiritual and the physical. He's constantly moving in between it as he prepares for death. And you can see the dialogue that is happening. These are incantations that are real, that in real life, or will I say normal life, or in the shrines and all of these incantations actually brings about certain responses from the gods. But you see playwrights and dramatists are infusing those things into their text. And these texts, when they go and they are performed, the hope is that they are performed in truth to be able to create the same kind of response. It might not create the response that you actually hear thunder in the theater or something, but there's a transference or a transformation that happens to the performer where they become a vessel that is occupied by this God on the backs of these incantations that are recited in this place. So magic is a huge form or a huge part of West African performing arts, whether it be just standalone dance, whether it be just standalone music, whether it's a combination of the two to tell a story. That story always has the part of the magical, because the magical in itself is the spiritual, and the spiritual in itself is the core essence of the African. Because the African, as I said earlier, he believes that all the worlds are existing at the same time. At the same time. So the world of the gods, the world of the ancestors who are the living, who have passed on, and then the world of the living, they are constantly having a dialogue. They are constantly affecting each other. So in the West African belief system, the gods, which is the unseen, they need the seen, the living, just as the living needs the gods. They both need themselves. So each person has to perform his part of living or his part of existence for the other person to be able to live. So it's like a magnet, where you have the two poles. Each pole has to perform its part for the currents to continually transfer between the poles. So that is how it is. So that's why you see the West African performing arts is engaging and is determinant on the spiritual. It's determinant on saying that every action you have in the physical being is having a counteracting action in the spiritual being that could either be positive or be negative. It's telling stories of people that have come before, what they did and what it did for them in terms of what the results of their actions were, either to discourage the living from doing it or replicating it or encourage it to be done again. And then we have these things that are now adapted to different scenarios by different performers to mean different things. But in the core of it is that spirituality, the spiritual essence of the African is captured in the West African performing arts. So we have dancing. Dancing are multiple, they are multifarious in nature, different kinds of dance. I sent some material earlier on. I hope you've seen it, some videos where you see. And what I did with the videos, of course, I wasn't making the videos myself, I was researching them. So we don't have too many from West Africa, but it is still symbolic of Africa when we have dances from East Africa, South Africa, and Central Africa. But it's still the same kind of theme that it does, the movement of the upper body and the lower body to tell a story, to engage the audience in either replicating a reality they know about or introducing a relationship that they desire. So this thing is captured in time and replicated over time. Then we have the songs. The songs are also spiritual. They're always talking about a story between the man and his God, or the God and man, the living and the dead, and even the living dead, because, excuse me. Sorry about that, it's pretty hot here. Okay, so because there's a constant belief, as I said earlier, that these two people, the living, or these three people, actually four people, excuse me. So you have the gods, you have the transisted, which is with the people who have died, in quote, who have become the ancestors. Then you have the living, and then you have the living dead. So living dead are people who are trapped. In Catholicism, it's called like purgatory. So these are people who are trapped in between the worlds. And it behoves on the living to help these people cross over. And that is why they even have performances that capture that thing, where at a certain time of the year, the people, the living, they go and they create these performances that have both introduction, complication, and resolution, the three acts, to tell a story that will encourage the gods or the ancestors to engage so as to help the living dead, who are the dead who are still living, to be able to cross over into the world of the ancestors, which is the world of the dead. So I was talking earlier on also about theater in terms of how it has come into the contemporary space. That is West African performing arts, how it's doing right now where we are in West Africa. So in West Africa, we have, as I call the countries, the most vibrant theater is more in the Anglophone. More of the Francophone theater is captured in terms of comedy and in terms of dance. A lot of it is captured in that. In the Anglophone countries, you have a lot of textual literature, textual performances, where contemporary West African performing arts has been contemporized and captured in text to engage or share stories of our heritage or share stories about our ancestries and things that have happened, or celebrate true life events like Death and the King's Horseman, which Wole Soyinka had written about a true life event that happened in Western Nigeria, which is in West Africa. So you have this text, like things like Death and the King's Horseman, as I said, the gods are not to blame. The gods are not to blame. You have plays like Ake. You have plays like plays that capture that continual dialogue between the spirit in an African kind of setting. So you have maybe something like Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives. You have Idia. You have these, which are historical plays that tell you about great kings of the past. But all of them use the theatrical tools of dance, mime, dialogue that is captured in incantations, and the actual dialogue between characters, mask and costuming, which also includes the body art, and then the ritual space. These are always captured in all this textual, textual metamorphosis that has happened to the traditional or historical performing arts, as it were. So I'll use myself as an example because, as I said, I am a practitioner of the arts. So let me come into more, and let me give you more analogies in my practice. Excuse me about that. Okay, so I came to Toronto 2001, and I'm the artistic director of African Theatre Ensemble. And African Theatre Ensemble is Africa, which is where Nigeria and West Africa is, and then Cannes. Cannes is Canadian and Theatre Ensemble. So the goal of the theatre company is to create a dialogue between these two people, both the Africans and the Canadians, for them to better understand themselves, better appreciate themselves, so that there's actual full-scale communication, which is communication and feedback that leads to transformation of self, change, acceptance, and tolerance. We have brought a couple of African plays to Toronto, from Flawed to Death at the King's Houseman, as I said, to Marriage of Anansewa, which is from Ghana, with Sizwe Bansi is Dead, which is from South Africa. We've brought all those, and we've used both Nigerians, both Ghanaians, both South Africans, Kenyans. We've used all the nationalities in Africa who are residing in Toronto to perform these plays. And we've also used Canadians who have different ancestry, whether it be Irish or German or French or whatever it might be, to perform in this play. Because, as I said, at the end of the day, the characters in these plays, even though most of them are contemporary in nature, because as it is now textualized performance, they are also symptomatic of a mirror image, of a symbol of the living in the cosmos of the African. So yes, so you might have, like I played in Death and the King's Horseman, I played Sergeant Amusa. But Sergeant Amusa is not just a sergeant, in quote, as a police officer, as you will see in a normal Western play, but he's also a representative of authority in the spiritual world of the African. So I don't know if it's clear. So the characterization in West African performing arts, they could be dual in nature, they could be tripartite in nature, they could be, it all depends. So you might have a policeman. The policeman has a name, let's say Jude, that's his name in the play or the dance drama, or whatever it is. He might be, but the way West African performing arts is that he will serve different purposes, not just being the character of a law enforcement officer, but he will have, excuse me, he will have, a mirror image in the spiritual world. So he could be Sergeant Amusa in the physical world, but in the spiritual world, he is Ogun, he's Shango, he's a god, he's Thor, you know what I mean? So his dialogue captures those kind of things, and there is transference that happens between him. So when he has engagement with other characters, his different nature shows. He could show in dance, he could show in movement, he could show even in his rage, his dialogue, his incantation, but he's never just physical. And that is one of the differences between West African performing arts and the Western performing arts, where the characters in themselves are very stark and they are captured or trapped in one realm of existence. But in West African performing arts, the characters are flipping between different realities. The realities of the spiritual cosmos, the contemporary cosmos, the cosmos of the in-between. The characters keep on going through this world as they try to resolve the central conflict of the performance, whether it be dance, as I said, whether it be mime, whether it be actually a structured drama. So you have a historical performing companies which you could look up, like the Ogunde Traveling Theatre, Ogunde, which is spelled, Ogunde, Herbert, that's his first name, Hubert. Herbert Ogunde, he was the first person to take the West African historical kind of performing arts, which is the one that is in the rural areas, in the villages, and which is very historical and very spiritual and cultural in nature. He took it, restructured it, and brought it into the contemporary space to be able to tell moral tales, to either comment on what was happening or to remind the people of the spiritual past. Excuse me about that. Okay, so we have Herbert Ogunde. We also have Ojo Ladipo. Ojo is spelled O-J-O. Ladipo is spelled L-A-D-I-P-O. Sorry. So we have O-J-O, which is his first name. Ladipo, which is his last name, spelled L-A-D-I-P-O. So we have Ojo Ladipo, who also had his plays where he took this same thing, as I said, taking the ancient or historical performing art forms, let me not say transforming it or restructuring it to be able to fit the Western mode of performance. But we have these things where they actually go around town, so that's why they call them traveling theaters, which they used comedy and all of that, taking stock characters that we knew from the spiritual, in terms of the spiritual spaces where these plays or these performances were put on. They took these spiritual characters and they brought them into the contemporary space and gave them a different kind of characterization to be able to share the messages they wanted to share. So that's an example of two people who have been able, or who did in the past, excuse me, who did in the past take West African traditional traditional performing arts and put it in a contemporary space to be able to tell stories. So I was talking about myself in Toronto. So we brought plays like that to the African Theatre Ensemble, and we had plays mostly in the West End in terms of Toronto. We even took our plays. I think we had taken a play out to the suburbs, Brampton and the rest, to the GTA. But the goal of the play, as I said, was to introduce the cultural forms and West African performing arts to the Western market, or the Western mind, or the Western art scene. But then it was, as I said, it was very rich in dance, and mime and incantation and songs, and the costuming. We know the body art, the use of the mask and the use of the masquerade form to create this personage that was constantly switching between all the realities. And in all the plays, that even the plays that were even very contemporary in form, a play like, I'll give an example, a play like Coma, which I wrote and I directed, it was a contemporary play set up in a hospital, and it had just three characters, a three-hander. Just a three-character, a woman in coma and her children, a man and a woman who were her kids, who were trying to pull the plug. So it was a play about euthanasia. But because it was coming from the West African performing arts mind place, it wasn't like how it would be performed in the Western world. So we even had the woman who was in a coma still dialoguing with us. We still had caught up in the world of the spirits, which is the world of the ancestors, which she hasn't fully been able to go into, and still having to be trapped in between the worlds. So we had the performance themselves, which is the son and his sister. We have them having to do dance sequences, having to use music and engagement, which is replicating the real performing arts of West Africa in the contextual sense of it, and in the functional sense of it, and in actually the real sense of it. Because we do it constantly here. It happens everywhere in the marketplace. It happens in church, where you see, excuse me, where you see that they take the Western notion of church and they entrap it into the West African understanding of the cosmos to be able to commune with the gods, whether it be the Christian God or the traditional God. So they are talking drums, and there's the movement, and there's the dance, and there's the cry, and all, because for them, that is how they invoke the spiritual to engage with the contemporary, with the physical. So even in the play, the Coma, which was very contemporary and very, it was proscenium stage and all of that, where there was a difference between the audience and the performance, but still, there was still the infusion of the West African performing arts, which is, as in the tools of the West African performing arts, which is a preponderance of dance, a preponderance of music, a preponderance of incantations, a preponderance of the use of physical transformation of self via the costuming of self. Either it be body art or mask or the masquerade costume. It could even be a masquerade costume. It could even just be the costume of a hunter, or any kind of costuming. But whatever that costuming was, whatever it does actually, it's something that captures both this world of the seen and the world of the unseen. And that is how you see how pure the West African performing art is when you put it in different kinds of performance spaces. So usually you have them in places where we call like theater in the round, which we also have in Western culture, theater in the round, which is the audience is around the performance. But we in West African performing arts, the performers themselves are not confined only to that performance space. They also go into the audience and they bring the audience out to perform with them. And the audience instinctively knows when they're to engage. Because as I said, it's not even only the audience that engages with the performer, the world of the spirit engages with the performer. Because the incantations and the music and the dance, it's not only just telling the story or resolving the conflict, it is also inviting the gods to intervene. Because most of the conflict in the West African performing mindset is resolved through a dialogue between the physical and the spiritual. So a performance is not complete, or a resolution is not believable if it happens by itself on the spiritual, on the physical plane. There has to be the engagement of the spirit in one way or the other. They call it Deus ex machina, the hand of God. So you can see that in the historical perspective of West African performing arts, there was already that understanding of the Deus ex machina, that there is going to be an intervention of the spiritual for us to be able to resolve this conflict. But for us to get the spiritual to engage with us to resolve this conflict, we have to prove, or we have to, earn the engagement. And we can only earn the engagement by using the tool of worship, the tool of adoration, the tool of submission, the tool of surrender, and all of that kind of stuff. And that is done through music, through dance, through the offering of sacrifices, as it were, in that process of trying to get the spiritual to engage in the physical. So you see that the performing arts in itself includes that, whether it be something that's happening in a ritual space, in a traditional setting, or it be something that's happening in a contextualized space where someone has taken that performance itself, contextualized it in terms of text and form, and putting it on the stage in a foreign capital. He still has to take those ingredients, those factors, those tools, and place them in that three-act structure in such a way that is believable, it is truthful, and it is memorable, and it is enlightening, it teaches, it changes. It's, how will I put it? It stands pure in its performance, pure in its fidelity to the African culture and belief system, and then it is true in terms of the people who have invested money or time to come and watch it or engage with it. So we see the West African performing arts in that kind of context when you bring it into the bigger world. How do we learn the dance forms in itself? Excuse me. The dance forms in itself, I'm sorry about that. It's pretty hot in here. I'm sure you can see my sweat. Okay, the dance form in itself, first and foremost, it's very top body and below body. Top body and below body. Top body and below body. For the Western dance forms, the ballet and everything, it's always very straight back, angular features, and then the grace, But in the West African performing arts, it's very mimical of nature. So your dance, either you are becoming like an animal, you're always becoming like something in nature, becoming like a tree, becoming like a dog, because what you're saying is that the man, nature, and the gods are one. And in the constant dialogue to create resolution or to receive that which you desire, you have to become everything to be able to please the spirit as you engage with the plot or the story of whatever your performance is. Whether it's historical, whether you're trying to remember something, whether you're trying to commemorate something, you have to become all of this. So the dance are very low body. You're always coming down to the ground, which is where the earth is. You're always engaged in that kind of place. With drums, and we use the bata drums, and our beats are very rhythmical and very fast-paced, which just shows the vitality of the West African mind, of the West African reality, the vitality, the engagement between all these different worlds. So even in our beats, the drum beats we use, even in the rhythm we adopt, it's always staccato, very, very fast-paced, very, very alive, very ebullient in nature. And that's one of the themes that the West African performing art has, very rhythmical. You're moving, either you're using the bata drums, we are going bang, 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 and each drum, each sound connotes something. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Each sound, that's the sound of Shango, the god of thunder. There is a way they beat the drums, that immediately the performer knows that he has to go into a different mind space, a different spiritual space, because right now we've gotten into the world of Shango, and in the world of Shango, it's thunder and lightning, and it's very vigorous and very earthly, very elemental. So you have to go maniacal. But that is captured in the drum. So in the performance in West African performing arts, just in the performance, that is just the performer and the drums. He's just listening to these drums. And through mime and movement, he's becoming all those things in a very smooth, transition between these things. He's talking to you, he's telling you a story without using words. He might not even be singing a song. But every time he goes into the form, he tells you the snake and all of that. He's telling you this story with his eyes and everything, and he's feeling the gods, he's feeling everything. But you, the performer, so you, the audience who is listening, because you are of that same cosmos, you can engage with it. And then the use of incantations, as I said, incantations are magical in themselves. They are things that have been repeated over time, and they are supposed to bring about a certain response. So there's a belief, like among the Yorubas, that the name you are given is called an oriki. It's the name you are given when you are born. It's very long, and it is a connection between you and the spiritual. And they say if somebody knows your oriki, they can bring harm to you, or they can bring good to you. So oriki is like a praise that's given up to you. So like my name is Jude. So they might say my oriki might be maybe Aduni or something. And then, but when they say the full oriki, it might be Jude, you the son of Francis, who was the one who conquered the place. So it tells a story. It tells my story. You get, it says the son of this who did that, who was the daughter of this who did that. You are the one who doesn't eat salt, because salt was the one who brought harm to this. You are the one who, on the fourth day of the week, you must climb on the palm tree and herald the sun, so it tells the entire story of me as it comes from my heritage. So in performance, we use orikis. We use orikis to either remind the character of who the character is, in order for the character to have the enablement or the knowledge they need to be able to resolve the conflict or they find themselves in. So you cannot just have a character that just resolves things by itself, by him or herself. He has to do it in consonance with the world of the African, which is the spiritual world or the cultural world of the African. So it's very strange where you see in West African performing arts, where you see very independent-minded characters who just do things by themselves without having any engagement with other forms of existence. to be able to get even a support amongst people, for them to form a, what I say, one mind, one voice, to be able to confront a bigger evil. So those are things that are very important to know about West African performing arts. The collegial nature of it, the spiritual nature of it, the ancient, or the, what I say, the antiquital nature of it, knowing that this is something that's coming from the past, and how organic it is in terms of how it uses the environment in its performance and everything, and the essence, which is the soul essence of it, about as in man being in constant dialogue with the spirit world, and his actions are informed by that spirit world. The use of music, which is very important, the use of incantations, which is very important, the use of movement, of mime, and of mask, and of body art to transform, because each character has to transform to become something in his environment, to be able to get the powers it needs, or he needs, or she needs, to be able to confront the world in which they find themselves. As I said, in West Africa, we have Nigeria. Nigeria is the most populous country in West Africa, so most of my examples were Nigerian. I'm also Nigerian. So I gave you examples of that. So some, artists in Africa, in West Africa from Nigeria, you have playwrights like Wole Soyinka, Professor Wole Soyinka, as I said. You have Olarotimi, you have Femi Osofison, you have Zulu Sofola, you have JP Clark, Bekadere Demo, you have Sojiho, you have Samokala, you have Ahmed Yerima. So these are names that you can check out to see their work. You also have performing troupes, as I said, like the Ojo Ladipo Theatre, the Herbert Ogunde Theatre. These are traveling troupes that go from place to place, and they perform in the most traditional form of way, which is the theatre in the round, in very rustic kind of environment. And then you have also traditional events or traditional practices where West African performing arts, you see it in full, full bloom. Things like the Oshun Grove, where you have the worship of the Oshun water and river goddess, where at a certain time of the year, people come and they perform to be able to get her to engage in the life of her adherents. You also have different kinds of things in different kinds of ways. But I hope that I've been able to share with you, my time is almost up, West African performing arts in the historical, contemporary, and futuristic kinds of mind spaces. I hope you can look things up based on what I sent earlier on, that can give you more of a purview of what it's all about, where you can find it, how you can create it, and the rest. I hope it has been an engaging session. I'm very sorry for the coughing and breaks for water and the sweat, but I hope that I can speak to you once again. My name again is Jude Idada, speaking to you from Lagos, Nigeria, where I am from. And Toronto is my place I live, and this is where I work for now. I hope I'll come there soon, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Have a good day.